The battlefield was silent now, but smoke still rose from the broken ground. Crushed machines, fallen bodies, and burning ships filled the ruined land. Among the wreckage, something moved barely, slowly. Like a weak heartbeat under ash, it was her. The alien girl, left behind by her own people. Her skin was pale blue, her hair silver like starlight. Dirty and tangled now, her legs didn't move, covered in deep wounds and dried blood. Her hands trembled as she tried to crawl, but her body gave up. She had no energy, no hope, and worst of all, no one. She remembered how it happened. The attack was sudden fire, screams, chaos. Everyone ran, even the leaders of her species. No one looked back, not even once. She had shouted for help, her voice shaking with fear. "Wait, please, help me." But her words were lost in the noise of engines and gunfire. Then silence. Only the cold wind and the sound of her slow breathing remained. Hours passed, maybe a day. Her eyes started to close when she heard footsteps, heavy ones. Not her kind, no, this was something else. She opened her eyes just enough to see a tall figure in metal armor. A human soldier. He walked carefully, scanning the area, his rifle ready. His face was rough, sunburnt, and covered in dust. But when he saw her, he stopped. For a moment, nothing happened. She looked at him, ready to be shot or ignored or left again. She didn't care anymore. She was just tired. But the human soldier did something strange. He walked toward her, slowly, and knelt beside her. He didn't point his weapon, didn't speak. He reached into his belt and pulled out a small water bottle. He gently touched her hand and offered the bottle. The girl blinked in confusion. Why would a human offer her water? Why wasn't he afraid of her? She tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. The human, seeing her struggle, slowly raised the bottle and helped her drink. The water touched her lips, cold, sweet, alive. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't understand why. He looked at her legs, saw the damage, then looked around. No medics, no transport, just ruins and death. "Where are your people?" he asked softly. Of course, she didn't understand the words, but his tone was calm, gentle, not like the others. He looked up as another human soldier shouted from a distance, "Ray, what the hell are you doing? That thing's not one of us." Ray didn't move, didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the girl in front of him. "I'm not leaving her," he muttered to himself. He didn't know who she was or why she was abandoned. But he saw something in her eyes, pain, yes, but something else too, a spark. A silent scream for help that no one had heard until now. The girl coughed softly and closed her eyes again. Ray knew she wouldn't last long like this. He made his choice. He picked her up in his arms. She was light, too light. Her head rested against his chest. His heart was pounding, not from fear, but from anger. Who would leave a child behind like this? Enemy or not, this wasn't right. As he carried her through the broken land, he passed human soldiers who stared at him with confused eyes. Some whispered, some laughed, some shook their heads. But Ray kept walking, his grip firm, his mind clear. "She's coming with me," he said again. No one stopped him, but no one helped either. He didn't care. In a world full of war and hate, he had made one simple choice. He would not abandon her. Not today. Not Evilari did not expect to wake up again. The last thing she remembered was the human's warm arms, his strong heartbeat. Then nothing, no pain, no sound, only darkness now. She felt heat, not fire, but something soft, warm air brushing against her cold skin. Her eyes fluttered open. She was no longer lying on rubble. There was a roof above her, strange glowing lights. She was inside some kind of room, metallic but clean. A soft blanket covered her, and her wounds were wrapped. She blinked again, unsure if this was a dream. Suddenly, she heard boots slow, careful steps. Her heart raced. She turned her head weakly and saw him again. The human soldier. He held a tray with food and something that smelled sweet. "You're awake," he said softly. Of course. She didn't understand the words, but his voice, steady, calm, made her body relax. He placed the tray near her and sat on a metal chair beside the bed. Alari stared at him, confused. She had always learned humans were cruel, violent, selfish, but this one didn't yell, didn't hurt her. He had saved her. For what reason? She tried to sit up but gasped in pain. Her legs still didn't move, numb. Useless, tears filled her eyes. She was still broken. The human Ray reached forward quickly but gently. He helped adjust her pillow and placed a cup to her lips. Warm soup touched her tongue. Her body trembled, but accepted the kindness. She looked at him with questioning eyes. Why? She whispered in her own alien language. Ray didn't understand the word, but he understood the feeling. He sighed and leaned back, scratching his beard. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept in days. Yet here he was feeding her, caring for her like she mattered. Others had told him he was wasting time. She's an enemy, they said. A trap. Some warned. A burden. Others laughed. But Ray had seen something else. Not a weapon. Not a monster, just a girl. A scared, wounded girl who had no one. Flashback to earlier. Ray had stood outside the base with the girl in his arms. Command refused entry. You brought back an alien, the officer snapped. She's not a prisoner. She's a liability. Ray didn't back down. She's hurt. She's just a kid. I'm not letting her die out there. They argued, but in the end, the medical staff let him place her in a spare room, on the condition that he would be fully responsible. Now as Alari looked into his eyes, she saw no fear, no hate, only something she had never seen before: gentleness. And that scared her more than any gun. Her kind had never treated her like this. Even before the war, she had been different. Unwanted, weak legs, slow reflexes. Quiet voice. To her people, she was a mistake, a waste of space. But this human didn't treat her like garbage. He even smiled at her, not with pride, but comfort. She pointed at herself, then pointed at him, then made a questioning sound. He seemed to understand. Ray, he said, tapping his chest. Then he pointed at her, waiting. Ilari, she said slowly. Ilari, he repeated, nodding with a soft grin. It sounded strange from his mouth, but not bad. She repeated his name too. Ray, he laughed, and for a second, the air in the room became light. Ilari didn't smile, but her breathing calmed. This was the first time anyone had said her name like it mattered. Later that night, Ray sat outside her room. One of the soldiers came by and shook his head. You're getting soft, Ray. Ray didn't answer, just stared at the stars. Maybe he was getting soft. Or maybe the world had become too hard, and someone needed to remember what kindness looked like. Inside the room, Ilari whispered something quietly before falling asleep. No one heard it, but if someone had, they would have heard the alien girl say, "Please don't leave me." The human base was not built for guests like her, especially not an alien, especially not a broken one. But Ilari was still there, alive, because one soldier refused to follow orders. Ray checked her bandages every morning. He brought food, helped her drink, and sometimes just sat in silence. He didn't understand her language, and she didn't understand his, but somehow they understood each other. Pain didn't need translation. Kindness didn't need words. Still, not everyone shared Ray's heart. Whispers moved like smoke through the halls. She's dangerous. She's spying. Why is he wasting food on it? They didn't use her name. They called her it. Ray hated that. One morning, Ray walked into the room with a tray of food. But Ilari was crying. She tried to hide it, but her shoulders were shaking. He froze, then slowly walked. Closer, Ilari, he said softly. She pointed at the wall. Someone had drawn cruel words in black ink. Strange shapes she didn't fully understand, but she could feel the hate behind them. Ray cursed under his breath. He reached for a cloth and cleaned the wall. Without saying a word, Ilari looked down, ashamed. He gently touched her hand to calm her. You're not alone, he said, even if she didn't know the words. His eyes said everything. She nodded slowly, wiping her tears. Outside, things were worse. Command had noticed Ray spending too much time with the alien girl. He was called into a private meeting. A gray-haired officer stared him down. "This isn't a petting zoo, Sergeant Ray," the officer snapped. "That girl is enemy species. Our protocols are clear. Non-human captives are to be isolated, studied, not protected like family." Ray stood straight. "She's not a captive," he replied calmly. "She's a child, injured, left to die. I brought her in so she wouldn't bleed out in the dirt." "And now?" the officer asked sharply. "You're bonding with her? Feeding her? Defending her like she's your own?" Ray didn't flinch. "Yes, sir." Silence. The officer leaned back, eyes narrowing. "You've got 1 week. After that, she's not your problem anymore." He stood up and left before Ray could argue. Ray walked back to the room with heavy steps. 1 week, 7 days. What would happen to Ilari after that? When he entered, Ilari looked at him with questioning eyes. He tried to smile, but it was forced. She noticed. She always noticed. That night, Ray brought something different, a device like a small tablet. With glowing lights, it was a translator, old tech, but maybe enough. He placed it between them and spoke slowly. "My name is Ray." The translator buzzed, clicked, and repeated in Ilari's language. Ilari's eyes widened. She pointed to herself. "Ilari." They both smiled. Finally, something they could use to speak, even just a little, over the next few days. They shared small things, names of things, food, sky, leg, pain, light, simple questions. Hungry? Yes. Cold? No. But on the 6th night, Ilari asked something new. "Why care?" Ray paused, his heart heavy. He sat down beside her, thinking carefully. Then he answered slowly. "When I was young, my sister was hurt. People said she was weak, broken. But I didn't leave her." Ilari watched him. He looked far away now, as if speaking to ghosts. "They said I should move on," he continued. "Let her die. Let her be forgotten. But I didn't. I stayed." He looked at Ilari. "And now, I see her in you." Tears filled Ilari's eyes again. But they weren't from sadness this time. They were from something else, something new, hope. Ray reached into his bag and placed a small crystal in her hand. It was her people's energy stone. She had lost it in the battle. He had found it, cleaned it, and kept it safe. She stared at the glowing gem. Then at Ray. She squeezed it tightly and whispered something that didn't need translation. "Thank you." Outside the room, soldiers still gossiped, still laughed, still doubted. "She's not one of us," they said. But Ray, he had already decided. Maybe she wasn't one of them, but that didn't mean she wasn't worth saving. The storm outside rattled the metal walls of the outpost. Thunder cracked, and winds howled like a beast in pain. Inside a quiet room dimly lit, warm despite the chaos, a miracle was unfolding. Ilari sat propped up by pillows, a soft blanket around her small frame. Her legs still didn't move, but her eyes were no longer afraid. They followed every step Ray took, as if she had started to believe that he wouldn't disappear like the others. Tonight was different. Ray walked in not with food, but with something small in his hand, a children's picture book, torn at the edges, pages yellow, but still bright and full of color. He smiled as he sat down beside her. "Let's try something new tonight," he said gently. The translator hummed and struggled, but offered a broken version of his words in her language. Ilari tilted her head, confused but curious. He opened the book and pointed. "Cat," he said, slowly. The translator beeped, then "Cat." Ilari blinked, looking at the fuzzy animal on the page. She looked up at Ray and repeated softly, "T." His face lit up. She had spoken a real word, a shared sound between two worlds. She saw his reaction and tried again. "Cat," she said, more clearly this time. Ray laughed softly. "Yes, cat." She looked back at the book, pointing to the next picture. "Tree?" she guessed, voice unsure. "Yes, tree." The translator buzzed in delight, recognizing the exchange. Ilari smiled a real Small but true smile. It was her first in weeks. Each page was another step across. The bridge between them, dog, sun, sky, soldier, alien. Until finally, Ilari tapped a picture of a small girl holding hands with a taller man. She pointed to herself, then to Ray, her voice trembling. "Friend?" Ray didn't answer right away. He looked at her, really looked at her bandaged body. Her glowing eyes, her uncertain hope. Then he placed a hand on his chest and said clearly, "Friend." The translator repeated the word in her tongue. She exhaled slowly. Something inside her chest tight for so long finally loosened. But peace never lasted long in wartime. That same night, alarms screamed across the base. Red lights flashed, boots thundered down the corridors. Ilari tensed, fear returning like a cold flood. Ray ran to the door and checked the screen. A perimeter breach. Hostiles approaching, unidentified crafts near the hills. He grabbed his gear, helmet in one hand, weapon in the other. He turned back to Ilari, who sat frozen in her bed. He walked over, knelt, and looked her in the eyes. "Stay here. You'll be safe," he said, though the translator struggled to keep up. She reached for his sleeve. "Ray," she said softly. He paused, surprised. She took a deep breath. Then, slowly, in broken but clear English, she said, "Come back." It was not just sound. It was a promise, a plea, a connection stronger than orders. Ray's eyes softened. He placed his hand over hers. "I will," he whispered. Then he was gone. The door slid shut, leaving Ilari in silence once again. But she didn't feel alone this time. Not really. She looked at the book, still open beside her. Her finger brushed the picture of the girl and the man. Friend. Hours passed, sirens echoed, and explosions shook the ground. She couldn't walk, couldn't fight, but she could hope. Hope that the human soldier would keep his promise. And somewhere in the smoke and fire, Ray was fighting not just to protect the base, but to return to the one soul who finally called him friend. Smoke filled the sky like black wings. The base shook again, another explosion. Closer this time, walls groaned, lights flickered, and distant shouts echoed down the cold steel corridors. Ilari couldn't move her legs, but her mind raced. Ray hadn't come back yet. He said he would. He promised. She stared at the door, waiting for it to open. Minutes felt like hours then. Nothing, just silence. Ilari clenched her jaw, fingers gripping the blanket tightly. She wasn't useless. She wasn't weak. Not anymore. Slowly, she pulled herself to the edge of the bed. Her body screamed in pain, but she ignored it. She reached out for the tablet device Ray had given her, the one with the translator. And more. Back when Ray wasn't looking, Ilari had studied it. Her kind had knowledge of tech far beyond what humans understood. Now, she accessed the base's emergency systems through it. She had seen Ray do it before just once, but it was enough. A small hologram blinked to life. Base map, troop movements, surveillance feeds. Ray was outside the south wall, pinned down with his unit. 3 hostile crafts were approaching. Ilari's heart pounded. She tapped the screen with shaky hands and opened a control panel. Defense turrets, offline, energy grid, unstable. She stared at the systems in frustration. So much broken code. But she remembered something from her own ship, an override pattern. Could she use her alien knowledge to fix human defense systems? She tried. Eyes narrowed. The device buzzed angrily. Sparks flickering across the panel. Her fingers danced quickly, typing commands in both alien script and human code. "Come on. Come on," she whispered. Suddenly the turret grid rebooted. One by one, red icons turned green. Automated cannons whirred to life on the outer walls. Outside, Ray was ducking behind cover when a sudden rain of fire lit up the sky. Turrets locked onto enemy ships, blasting them mid-air. The attackers didn't expect the sudden activation. One ship exploded in flames, crashing into the hills. Ray turned toward the base in shock. Someone had reactivated the defenses. But how? Back in the room, Ilari collapsed to the floor, breathing heavily. Her hands were shaking, but her face showed something new. Pride. She had done something. She had helped. The door opened suddenly. Ray rushed in, out of breath armor. Scratched and dusty, Ilari. He shouted, rushing to her. He saw her on the floor, tablet still glowing beside her. He dropped to his knees, lifting her gently. "What did you do?" he asked. The translator caught her soft voice as she whispered. "Helped you." Ray stared at her, stunned. "You activated the turrets?" She nodded weakly. He let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "You're full of surprises," he said, smiling. She looked at him, half smiling too. "Not helpless," she said with effort. "Not anymore." Ray carried her back to the bed. "Damn right," he replied. "You're stronger than half the soldiers I know." Later, a medic entered with fresh bandages. He paused when he saw Ilari, but Ray spoke firmly. "She's the reason we're still alive." The medic didn't argue, just nodded and got to work. Word spread fast. The alien girl had saved the base. The same girl they called weak, worthless, dangerous. Now they called her something else. Asset. Some even said hero. But to Ray, she was still just Ilari, the girl with a fire in her heart. The one everyone gave up on, except him. And now, she had saved his life, not with guns, not with strength, but with her mind, her courage, her will. He looked at her as she slept that night, and for the first time, he whispered something the translator didn't need to catch. "You don't owe me anything, Ilari, but I'm glad I found you." Outside, the base repaired itself. Inside, a bond stronger than war grew quietly. Between a human soldier and the alien girl no one wanted, but who proved she was not so helpless after all. It had been 7 days since Ilari turned the tide of battle, 7 days since she rewired the base's defense systems and saved everyone inside. But still, some looked at her with hesitation. Some couldn't forget what she was. Only one man ever cared about who she could become. Ray walked into her room that morning holding 2 strange objects. One looked like a small human training pad. The other, a polished alien crystal sphere. Glowing softly. "Time to get up, warrior," he said with a smile. Ilari blinked at him from her bed. "Me? Warrior?" she asked, uncertain. Ray nodded. "You saved more lives than most soldiers ever will." Her legs were healing slowly. They still didn't work fully. But the medics were helping, so was Ray. He had built her special braces using human steel and alien tech scraps. With them, she could stand shakily, briefly, but stand. That alone felt like flying. Ray helped her every morning, first with balance, then steps, then focus. But today was different. Today, he didn't just want her to walk, he wanted her to fight. "Why?" Ilari asked, her voice stronger now. Ray looked serious. "Because one day I won't be here, and you'll need to protect yourself." He paused, then added softly, "And I believe in you." She looked down at her hands, soft, thin, not made for war. But then again, they weren't made for fixing defense systems either, and yet, she did that. So she stood, braced and determined. Ray handed her the glowing sphere alien tech, raw and untamed. "It reacts to your energy," he explained. "Think of it like a weapon, but only if your heart is steady." She closed her eyes. The crystal floated in her palm, glowing brighter with each breath. Ray took a step back, impressed. "Let's try target practice." They spent hours training. Ray taught her how to aim, how to focus her energy, how to protect herself without fear. Ilari taught him how alien tech worked. They laughed when things exploded. They shouted in victory when she finally hit the mark. The bond between them was no longer just survival. It was trust. It was respect. It was something more, something words couldn't describe. That evening, something happened. A group of high-ranking officers visited the base. Among them was Admiral Roan, a man known for strict laws and cold decisions. He had heard about the alien girl who saved his soldiers. Ray and Ilari stood side by side as the officers entered the training room. The Admiral studied her eyes, sharp like knives. "This is the one?" he asked. Ray nodded proudly. "Ilari." Roan stepped closer. "You're the reason our base still stands." Ilari looked unsure how to respond. Ray gave her a slight nod. She stood straight, her legs wobbling just slightly in their braces. She raised her hand to her chest and said in clear English, "My name is Ilari. I help." A pause. The entire room waited for the Admiral's judgment. He finally spoke. "We don't make it a habit to honor outsiders," he said coldly. "But today, you are an exception." He turned to the others. "Mark her as an allied civilian asset." Cheers didn't break out, no applause. But Ray placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and smiled. "You did it," he whispered. Ilari smiled back. "I am one of us now?" He looked into her eyes and said, "You're something better, a new kind of warrior." Later that night, Ilari sat alone on the roof of the base. Stars blinked above her like tiny signals from home, but she didn't miss that place anymore. That planet had left her to die. Earth didn't give her a family, but it gave her one human who never gave up on her, and through him, she found her strength. Not in weapons, not in power, but in hope, the kind of hope that makes warriors rise. Even when they've been broken, even when they're alien, even when the world tells them they don't belong. The stars had never looked so bright. Ilari stood on the roof of the human base, leaning on her custom braces. Wind brushed through her silver hair. Now clean and tied back, her scars remained, but they no longer defined her. She was no longer a prisoner, no longer the girl left behind. Now she was a survivor, a defender, a warrior in her own way. And still Ray never left her side, but peace never stayed long. A sharp siren rang across the base, one Ilari hadn't heard before. A red light pulsed from the central tower. Ray's voice came through the intercom, urgent. "Ilari, it's your people. They're back. And they're not here to talk." Her eyes narrowed. She knew they would come eventually, to erase the mistake they left behind, to finish what they started. But this time, she wasn't helpless, and this time, she wasn't alone. Outside the walls, 3 large alien ships hovered in the sky, their energy cannons charged, soldiers already beginning to land. The human base scrambled for defense. Ray rushed into the armory, but stopped when he saw her waiting there, already suited up. "You shouldn't be here," he said, worry in his eyes. Ilari looked straight at him, her voice steady. "I should be here." She wore a mix of human armor and alien tech. The sphere Ray gave her floated near her shoulder, glowing brighter than ever. "I fight for this place," she said, tapping her chest. "For the one who stayed." Ray smiled, full of pride and fear. "Then let's do it together." The battle hit hard and fast. Alien soldiers poured in through the outer gates. Ray took cover behind a wall, firing shot after shot. Ilari moved beside him, using the floating crystal like a shield and weapon. She deflected plasma blasts, redirected energy, and struck enemies with bursts of light. The human soldiers stared. Many had never seen her fight before. This wasn't just survival, this was leadership. Ray fell back, cornered by 2 attackers, but before he could react, a beam of pure blue energy shot past him. Both enemies dropped, stunned. He turned and saw her hand raised, eyes blazing. "Ilari," he called. She stepped in front of him. "Not today," she said softly. "You won't fall. Not while I breathe." The final ship tried to land near the medbay. Ilari knew what that meant. They were coming for her, to capture her, erase her, to make her disappear again. But she ran toward them, instead. Braces sparking under her legs, the crystal at her side glowing like a star. She reached the landing zone alone. Facing an elite alien commander, he laughed cruelly. "You were thrown away. You are nothing." She raised her head proudly. "Then why are you afraid of me?" He charged. She responded with everything she had. The blast from her crystal shattered his armor. A shockwave knocked soldiers off their feet. Ray arrived just in time to see her standing above the fallen commander, her body shaking, but still standing. The battle ended at dawn. Alien ships retreated, humiliated, broken. They had come to erase a girl they called a failure instead. They had faced a warrior who had found her reason to live. Back at the base, wounded were being treated. Soldiers regrouped, and in the center of it all stood Ilari, tired but glowing, her presence undeniable. The same officers who once doubted her now saluted her. A formal announcement was made. Ilari is hereby recognized as an honorary defender of Earth. She looked toward Ray, eyes wide. He nodded and walked up to her. "Means you're officially one of us now," he said. She touched the patch on his chest. Then hers. "Us," she whispered. Smiling, later that evening, as the sun dipped below the clouds, Ray and Ilari sat side by side on the same rooftop. Quietly watching the horizon, she broke the silence. "I used to think I was a mistake," she said. "No one wanted me, not even my own people." Ray looked at her, then spoke gently. "They were wrong. And they lost something they'll never get back." She turned to him. "But you stayed." He nodded. "I promised, remember?" She reached out, her small alien hand resting on his. "No more alone," she whispered. "Never again." He replied. The stars blinked above, and for the first time, Ilari felt like she belonged, not because someone gave her a home, but because she had earned it, fought for it, and found it in the most human place of all, in someone who never gave up on her.